Hello my fellow Whovians and subscribers, and welcome to my latest Doctor Who review, where today I review the 123rd Doctor Who story, which is the first story of Peter Davison's second season as the Doctor, Arc of Infinity. So, Arc of Infinity, well, the basic plot of this story is as follows. Omega, an ancient Time Lord made of pure antimatter, once defeated by the Doctor, is plotting to cross over into this dimension by bonding with the Doctor. Meanwhile, the disappearance of a man in Amsterdam piques the curiosity of his cousin Tegan, who previously left the Doctor at Heathrow Airport and now finds herself at Omega's mercy. Fearing total destruction from the collision of matter and antimatter, the Time Lords recall the Doctor to Gallifrey to undertake the only viable solution: executing him. There we go, that is your basic gist of Arc of Infinity. Well, Arc of Infinity, this is a really weird one. This is a story that really should have a lot more going for it than it does, because if you actually take the time to kind of sit down and analyse the script is actually pretty decent, and there are some good ideas here. It's nice to come back to Gallifrey and have Omega back, and this whole matter and antimatter thing. It's really intriguing, to a point. I think this story is honestly very disappointing. It's such a shame. I think on paper it's great, but execution wise, not so good. I don't know, I just couldn't get into it. I'm really sorry. I tried, but for me the biggest issue with this story is the pacing. This was directed by Ron Jones, who previously directed Time Shite. Thankfully, this is an improvement over that. But at the same time, that's not much of a compliment in the grand scheme of things. Ron Jones really doesn't know how to pace a Doctor Who story, and it shows. I feel the pacing dragged on for me. All 4 parts dragged. I just couldn't get into it. There was just too much talking. Characters stand around and they talk, they stand around and they talk. There's no excitement in this story, despite the fact that you have Omega coming back. And actually, the return of Omega is crap. I feel they've really done him a disservice. I mean, the actor does his best, but really he's not menacing enough. Who plays Omega? Ian Collier, who does the voice. He's okay, but he doesn't really do as good a job as Stephen Thorne, the guy that played him in The Three Doctors. Omega is a very lackluster villain here. For the first, 3/4 of the story, he's kind of sitting on his arse, not doing anything. And then when his body sort of forms with the Doctor, Peter Davison then has to sort of take on the physical performance of Omega. But the voice is still being done. So there's a nice chase sequence at the end of the story with the Doctor, Tegan and Nyssa going after Omega. But it's really, by that point, you just don't care. It's just that you're so bored by the story, you just want it to end. Literally, that was my feeling. I was so fed up with the story, I just wanted it to finish. I'm not saying this story is like a disaster. It isn't a disaster as such. I'm sorry for the bright sunlight in the background. It's just very lackluster. It's a very mediocre Doctor Who story. That's how I see it. Also, Tegan. Now, we know in the previous story that Tegan was left behind at the airport by the Doctor and Nyssa, and now she's back. I'm surprised Tegan isn't more angry with the Doctor for leaving her behind, but no, she seems to just be all pally with him at the end, and I felt that was wrong. I felt that wasn't true to how it should have been done. I felt that that was a misdirection there. I think they should have changed that. They should have had Tegan be angry and confront the Doctor rather than just let the incident slide. I don't know why they did that. It just seemed to make no sense to have Tegan sort of teasing the fact that Tegan might be leaving, but then bringing her back in this story. It's just ridiculous. But luckily, we have a companion in most of this story. We have Nyssa. Sarah Sutton is great. She probably gives her best performance so far, actually. I think this is a great performance from Sarah Sutton. She gets quite emotional on certain moments as well. When she thinks the Doctor is dead, you even see some tears in her eyes. So she's a really good actress, Sarah Sutton. I give her real credit, and I've grown to really like Nyssa, actually. I wasn't too keen on Tegan and Nyssa at first, but I think over the course of their stories, they have become much more likeable, and Nyssa especially. Isn't she cute? She's also very cute. I think she's quite pretty. She's attractive. as well. So there's that. Peter Davison is actually quite good in this story as well. I think he gives one of his best performances, with the fact that he takes on sort of the physical performance of Omega, and the makeup, when we see his body, like, because Omega is antimatter, and we see his body kind of going back to the kind of green form that it was. Davison does that really well, and the makeup looks great. It looks really effective, just as good as Tom Baker's makeup in Megalos, one of the previous Tom Baker stories. So that's really good. And all the Time Lords, it's nice to see them back. I mean, their costumes are, once again, fantastic. Although I have to say, they have taken a bit of a downer on the sets. The sets do look a bit cheap this time, particularly in Gallifrey. It's such a shame, because we don't have the vast, expansive sets that we did in the Tom Baker era for, like, the Deadly Assassin or Invasion of Time. I think it's the Invasion of Time, anyway, or Time Invasion, or whatever it's called. So that was kind of a disappointment. So, but I think the reason that the sets look so cheap is because they filmed overseas. This time they filmed in Amsterdam, where the final chase takes place. So the story has the scope that it needs, but it doesn't have the drama that it needs. It's the script. My issues are the script. It's totally dull and unengaging. The story looks great, aside from the sets of Gallifrey, and there is the scope there, and it is trying to be this big, like, adventure, but it's just not, it doesn't work for me. And also, going into the Matrix this time is really lackluster. I mean, before, in The Deadly Assassin, when the Doctor entered the Matrix, he went in and literally had a massive, you know, journey in there. He literally was trying to evade every single disaster he could, and then he had that fight in the swamp. I mean, wow, it was incredible, the ideas that were there. But here, they're just floating. Literally, the Doctor and Tegan get stuck in the Matrix. They just float, and all we see are these little kind of lines, these silver lines that all they're doing is floating. So very dull, very uninventive interpretation of the Matrix here. You can tell that the actors are just sitting down on a green screen, and in the effects, in the editing room, they're just moving them up and down just to make it look like they're in this state of flux. It's really bad, if I'm going to be honest. It really is. I just didn't get anything out of this story. It's just a nothing plot. It's one of those stories where I feel it's neither great nor is it terrible. It's just nothing. Like, it's nothing. I don't hate it. I just don't. I mean, it's better than Time Flight, as I've said, but that's, hey, not much of a compliment. This should have been a great story. This really should have been. One other thing I have to mention is we get the very first appearance of Colin Baker in Doctor Who. Yes, as we know, Colin Baker will go on to play the Doctor. He's actually going to be the next Doctor. He's the 6th Doctor. So he is Davison's successor. But at the time, obviously, this was unbeknownst to them. But watching it now, you can kind of watch it with a sense of irony. And Colin Baker's actually pretty decent as the head guard of the Time Lords. So you could take the assumption that maybe the Doctor took that face. maybe he chose to have that face when he regenerates in the caves of Androzani. But that's more or less a fan theory. But there was one scene which I found kind of ironic, was when Colin Baker shoots Peter Davison at the end of part 1, which I found actually kind of ironic. I kind of chuckled. I thought, oh, that's funny. It's like the Doctor shoots himself. Obviously, in this story, Colin Baker isn't playing the Doctor, but you know what I mean. Just from a fan's point of view, you can kind of have a bit of fun with that idea. Barusa, the President, is very good. I think all the Time Lord actors are very good. Castellan returns, although he's played by Paul Jericho. He's pretty good. It gets a bit messy in terms of like who's betraying who. At one point, I think, who is it? Castellan is the villain, and then someone else is the villain. It gets a bit like, I mean, you don't really care. I mean, it gets a bit like weird. That's not the right word to use, but you know what I mean. And also, Colin Baker's character is called Maxil, although he just sort of disappears in the last parts of the story. I'm not sure quite what happens to him, but maybe I fell asleep during that bit. I mean, my patience was really tested, shall we say, watching this story. The music is all right, but there isn't much of it. Again, this is just an incredibly dull Doctor Who story. I thought it was a pretty mediocre way to kick off Davison's 2nd season. So I think I'll probably leave it there, and I'll just say that the script that was written by um, Johnny Byrne. Yeah, sorry, Johnny. I think you should have. Well, the ideas were there, but it wasn't the best executed. And also those other two characters, I think their names are, fun enough, one of them's called Colin, and one of them's called Stuart. Colin is actually Tegan's cousin as well, which is interesting. And Stuart is Colin's friend. I mean, those two, they really don't serve much of a purpose in the story. Like, it's just a way to lure Tegan back into the narrative. And also, there's this really weird sort of like pelican dinosaur-looking monster that attacks Colin and starts possessing him or whatever. And then they fight it off with a gun. They literally just shoot it with a gun. But the design of the costume is really silly. And I think Omega's design is actually really silly. I don't know why they changed his design. His design was much better in the Three Doctors. So it feels like they just wasted their time with this one. Like, it should have been a lot better than it was. Like, the return of such a great villain, and they wasted it. Literally, they wasted it. So I don't have much else to say. I think I'll just finish off by giving this story a 4 out of 10. Yeah, I'm sorry. It has good ideas and there are good parts to it, but I just can't give it any higher. I just can't. It's not a story I'm going to watch again, if I'm going to be honest. But yeah, anyway, that's my review of Arc of Infinity, or Arse of Infinity, as I will call it. So, okay, that's a bit harsh. But next time, I'm going to review Snake Dance, which I believe is actually a sequel to Kinder. So, yeah, I look forward to seeing that, and thank you very much all for watching this review, and until next time, I'm Mr. TARDIS11. See you soon. Bye for now.